And welcome to another Mailbox, and on April the 1st, a day, of course, when you shouldn't see anything on the internet that you believe, but nonetheless, most of you will be watching this tomorrow or later on, hopefully, anyway. So, let's get into some questions. The first one. So this was about the video I did on Blizzard's class design philosophies, their stated philosophies, not inferred ones. So it says, just to get this straight, Blizzard decided to make classes slower because people are bad. I wasn't very hyped for BfA to begin with, but the whole class design stuff is just plain bad for the game. So this was the particular element when I said Blizzard were talking about slowing down people's rotation so that they had time to look around and be able to spot things going on in an encounter, that sort of thing. Just to be clear on this one, I mean, when I said slow it down, I don't mean, you know, it's necessarily going to be slow, just slower than in Legion. Now, for some classes and specs, of course, you might think, well, it's already fairly slow. You know, so maybe it would be in that case. But yeah, just to be clear on that one, slowing it down. So at the moment, Ret Paladins is what I play, is very, very fast-paced. It's not super slow on the alpha. It's just slower for the equivalent haste. Like at the moment where I'm level 119 on the alpha, and it's obviously slower than it's going to be later on because I've got very little haste. That's what happens as you level up. But even when I had higher haste, it's still slower than the equivalent haste on Legion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's you know, crawling through treacle type slow. So it's one of those things, you just sort of try it out. If you can't try it out at the moment, obviously, because only so many people are in alpha, you know, for a particular class or spec that you're interested in, have a look at someone who plays it, playing it. Don't look at me, because I'm playing various other classes and specs at the moment. Don't look at me playing a hunter and going, oh, that looks really terrible. That's because I'm playing it very badly. So look at someone who actually knows what they're doing with that class and spec, playing on the alpha, and then you can make your own decisions based on that, is what I would say there. Next one. So, this was about class uniqueness, again, one of the class design philosophies. This is one of the ones I think there's a little bit of inconsistency. I'm not sure whether they've changed their mind, which is great, or whether it's not it is just not as expected, shall we say, because they said very much about doubling down on class uniqueness, and Ian Hazzard specifically gave the example of removing Displacer Beast from druids because, well, it's too much like Blink. It's basically Blink, and Blink is for mages. Then we end up with a situation where Ret Paladins get Hammer of Wrath back, which of course is an execute, but it works very differently to what Warriors execute, very, very differently. And maybe that allows it to be unique enough. At the same time, it was removed in Legion because it was considered an execute, and that's for Warriors. So there has obviously been a change in mind about what is unique. Well, one of two things has changed its mind. One, either they've changed their mind about what makes an ability unique. Hammer of Wrath, nothing like Warriors Execute, even though they're both usable below a certain health percentage. At the same time, Hammer of Wrath can be used in different situations as well, but that's not what makes it different. It's from ranged, it's a resource builder, not a spender, unlike Execute, you know, differences like that. But is that the change of mind? The fact that it's very different means that actually they can both be considered unique? Or have they changed their mind about being so inflexible about this attitude about unique abilities in the first place? I don't know. Maybe they've looked at it and thought, do you know what? There's so many abilities we need in the game. If you think about all the classes and specs, there's so many different abilities we need. We can't actually have complete uniqueness. Otherwise, we'll go back to vanilla when there was no abilities at all for anyone. Everyone had like 4 abilities. It was like that. So I don't know. The other one, of course, is they're talking about the rogue ability. He did a little video on this. There was a new talent, and this is a new talent added. This isn't like, as far as I remember, I mean, I should remember because I've played rogues in pretty much every expansion, but obviously at very casual level. Blade Rush. So Blade Rush is basically like a charge for rogues. Rogues have had charge types things before, like Shadow Step and stuff like that, of course. It's more of a teleport, really, I mean. But, I mean, Blade Rush is much more of a charge. There's damage at the end of it, which can be AoE damage if you've got you know, another ability active at the same time. But it does do damage at the end of it. Is that what's making it different to charge? Not very different to charge, is it? It's on a long cooldown, longish cooldown, 45 seconds. So again, I mean, that is very, very similar to charge, in my view. Does damage instead of a little stun. Is that what's making it different? I don't really think so. So I am actually wondering if, even though Ian Hazacostas back in, I think it was January, in fact it was January, who was talking about doubling down on this uniqueness, I think that's what they may have changed their mind about, you know. Because no rogue players asked for Blade Rush. As far as I can tell, they're not even particularly hyped about it. You know, so why is it in there? When it's clearly something that is very similar to a warrior's charge and would fulfill the same situations. But in terms of the displacer beast, yeah, I mean, this comes back to it. I just think that's unnecessary. It becomes extra unnecessary that it's been removed, given other things that they're doing with other classes and specs. There's enough rambling on that one, because I really don't know what their thinking is on that one now. I would love to ask them. So, question 3. So, about the AoE stun. So, again, this is another one that Blizzard was saying about removing AoE stuns from a lot more classes, making it much more of a niche area. So someone says here, I don't think they realise that making AoE stuns less available by class, they're just making the Tauren racial that much more powerful. Like the War Stompy thing. Well, maybe, but at the same time, I would look at it this way. One, if you look at Horde racers at the moment, they are where people can make a Blood Elf, often people have. You know, Blood Elves are by far the most popular of the Horde races, certainly for people that do like raiding and stuff like that, or high-end Mythic Plus. They're all over the place. Arcane Torrent is amazing. A lot of people just like them cosmetically as well. So actually introducing something that makes another class's racial more appealing from a utility point of view, is that necessarily a bad thing? Alright, the fact that it's Tauren, yes, makes it a bad thing. But in general, I don't necessarily think that makes it a bad thing. The other thing, of course, is, you know, not everyone is necessarily going to suddenly change to Tauren just because of this one thing. Because, again, Blood Elves, the Arcane Torrent, is still also useful. It's not that AoE stuns are the bee's knees in every situation. They're nice to have if you can have access to them. But if you can't, there are other things as well that would also be useful. So, yes, it may well get a few people rolling Tauren that wouldn't have ordinarily. But I don't think you're going to go from a situation where it's all Blood Elves and Horde to all Tauren either. But yeah, I mean, I see the point in that it might make that racial more powerful. I just don't think that it's going to have a negative effect on the game. On to the next one. So this was about Blizzard's complete revolution and now wanting to bring the class, not the player. Ian Hazacostas' example was, you're in a pug, getting a raid together, you've got one spot left, there's several other people signing up for that spot, one of whom is a hunter. You don't have a hunter in the party, you've got everything else, so you invite the hunter. So that's what they want. They want all classes to bring something, so that it's like, if you don't have that thing, you want that thing, so you bring that class. So, and I can see from an operational point of view why they might want to encourage that. Maybe to balance out classes. Certain classes that are not played as much. Maybe, you know, it's to put an emphasis on more people playing them. Although, ironically, I find from a raiding point of view in the raiding community, a lot of the classes that are not well represented tend to be the ones that actually do bring the best things anyway. The reason they're not played as much is either because they're more difficult to get on with, or maybe less fun to play. I mean, I don't know why it is that there are not as many warlocks or rogues as you would like in the raiding community, that they're sometimes very difficult to recruit. But nonetheless, that's the situation. Maybe there's something about those classes that a lot of people don't like playing, or at least PvE players don't like playing for some reason. But they are both ones with very good utility. But anyway, this is the philosophy. So someone's saying here, but what if you cannot bring a hunter on Mythic raiding level because most people interested in actual Mythic raiding have switched to Horde? Sad but true. And you can only find mediocre players not suitable for that sort of content. What I would say to this one is first of all, you're bound. But the second thing is that happens anyway. That just straight up happens anyway. Just because of the nature of it. Like, for example, my guild at the moment is on Mythic Argus. And it's getting very frustrating. We've had a 3% wipe, all the rest of it. Now, there are various issues in which we have basically been buggered by our available roster. One, restoration shamans are super, super powerful towards the business end of that fight. We don't have any. Right? Having even one restoration shaman helps us trivialize something that would have allowed us to kill that boss 2 weeks ago. Having two would have been amazing, but we don't have any. Execute classes. Again, you know, the real DPS check in this fight comes particularly at the end, right at the end. So execute classes are absolutely amazing. Having warriors and shadow priests in particular. In fact, you see in other guilds and kill videos and stuff like that, you where people display the damage meters, you'll see the shadow priest and the warrior basically nowhere on damage. You might just see them sneaking their little head at the bottom of the damage meters. By the end of the fight, they're at the top. They're at the top. They're super powerful. We don't have those. You know, we're pulling, and most of the time we don't have a warrior, and we don't have a shadow priest because again we've not been able to recruit a shadow priest since we lost ours. You know, so those sort of things already happen. I mean, people might remember back, you know, well, when we were doing Coven even, just still this tier, what you would ideally like is, well, shadow priests again, but warlocks, affliction warlocks. We don't have a load of them. We have one. We did have one. But that was it. One. Some people have 2 or 3 or 4. You know. And they've been really strong all tier. It's not like they've suddenly been strong for this fight. You can understand it if a particular class or spec was strong for like one fight, but not for the rest of it. Of course, you're going to struggle to find people that play that. But they've been strong, you know, for a year or more, and there's still not enough of them. So, again, this... you know, coming back to this idea that Blizzard maybe are trying to encourage that. And I only say maybe, they haven't said that they're doing it to encourage that sort of thing. But if they were, you know, it doesn't work even when they are really strong. But yeah, coming back to the question, what do you do? With nothing you can do. I mean, in the case of hunters themselves, there are certain classes and specs, even when recruiting is really hard, some classes and specs traditionally are a bit easier to find. Hunters are not so hard to... Like, Hunters, Shadow Priest, Boomkins of the strong classes are probably... They're definitely a lot easier to find than good rogues, mages, warlocks, for example. So, you know, but in general, yeah, you can be buggered. You can find yourself on a tough encounter and get overtaken by loads of other guilds that have those in their roster and you don't. That's the bugger of it. And that's why I do not like this philosophy. You know, I am much more of a bring the player, not the class type of person. You know, because of this. I don't think it's particularly fair. When, I mean, you know, if a particular guild just didn't recruit a particular class, then that's down to them. If then they need it for a particular boss, well, that's their own fault. They should have recruited it. But when you've actually been trying... And, you know, even 2 months later, you still can't get one who's up to any sort of standard. It's harsh. It is harsh. But, you know, that's life. No one said life is fair. Next one. So, again, another recruitment one. So it says, as Horde, we actually stopped raiding Mythic because we couldn't find people to refill our roster after some people got a new job and couldn't anymore, other sorts. It's the sort of thing that does happen on a regular basis, of course. That's why recruitment is always an ongoing thing, even when your roster is full and you can't take anyone else on. You are still actively recruiting, you just obviously can't take anyone yet, but you keep your fingers in the pie, so to speak, so that you can keep an eye on what is available, so if anyone does leave, you can immediately move. We wanted to keep playing, but no one wanted to raid Mythic. I think Blizzard is just killing guild raiding slowly. On purpose or not, it seems to get worse every expansion. Now, I'll tackle that last bit here. One, they're not killing guild raiding. Guild raiding is actually flourishing. You know, and I know I talk a lot about, and it's perfectly true, that guilds are just struggling to recruit. And as you say, Horde are struggling as well. I know this from top right, you know, down to where our level is. They're struggling, even on Horde. It's just the struggle is much worse on Alliance. But there is still a struggle on Horde. In particular, smaller realms, all that sort of thing plays a part, as well as faction. But it's not killing guild raiding. There's loads of mythic guilds, loads of them. Even, you know, lots of them who are getting like cutting edges and stuff like that compared to previous expansions. You know, raiding really took off in Legion in a big way. And then I did a video in Nighthold about, are there too many guilds? Because I still think this, I haven't changed my mind on that as well. In fact, if anything, my mind's been reinforced on that. I just think there are actually too many guilds. And there are more players. There are more players doing Mythic now, and that's undoubted. More players getting Mythic raiding achievements now than was the case in previous expansions. Well, obviously, previous expansions we didn't have Mythic, but, you know, even in WoD, say. But I think even for that greater number of players, there are too many guilds, and it's all just stretched. You know, the population just stretched a bit thin for the number of guilds that there are. And I think part of what's done this, I think, you know, part of what creates that stretch, as well as what has caused more people to do Mythic raiding, is Legion systems, I think, have encouraged more people as in guilds that would have, in WoD, just left it at Heroic. They maybe would have tried Mythic, but they wouldn't have got very far. It's become much more accessible in Legion, and I think there's a few reasons for that, and this is my opinion here. I ain't got any hard facts on this, but Titan Forging, of course, this idea that you can get gear that will allow you to knock over the bosses more quickly. Traditionally, with the way raiding would work, is you go to a boss and you wipe on it, eventually you kill it, you get the loot off that boss, that makes you a bit more powerful, helps you out with the next one, brick wall, keep doing it, keep getting the gear that way. So... And what you do after you've killed a few bosses, then you're farming those bosses. Each week you're getting a bit more powerful with a bit better gear. Whereas it's now possible to start a tier with already very high item level gear. So you can sort of bowl over a few bosses if their mechanics are not that bad. Just because you've got gear from elsewhere. You've either got, you know, good pieces from the previous tier, or you've been to Mythic Plus Dungeons and been getting, you know, a few nice Titan Forge items there. The Mythic Cache, which guarantees, like, you know, you can do a plus 15, you've got a guaranteed 960 item level piece in your cache the next week. Guaranteed, and there's a decent chance that it'll be higher. You know, you can get... every couple of weeks the mythic caches, so you kill a particular boss and you kill it on LFR and you get a cache with a piece of gear that's round about the level that you're doing it at, so I get mythic pieces from that. All right, they turn into chaos crystals, but you know, some people will be getting some upgrades from them as well. Those sorts of things have made mythic raiding more accessible, and I think the effect of that, and again this is an opinion, I haven't done a study on this, the potential effect on that is that when you've got these guilds that ordinarily would have been stuck at Heroic, they maybe would have tried Mythic, but either they wouldn't get the numbers or they just wouldn't be able to kill Mythic bosses, and now can kill a few, even if not getting cutting edge. What might have happened before is a couple of their best players may have gone, well, I want to do Mythic, and they'd have gone and joined a Mythic guild. But now they're in a Mythic guild. So, although there'd still be potentially some players that might want to go into a more progress Mythic guild, nonetheless, if their aim was just to do some Mythic bosses, well, they can now do that in the guild they were in. And again, this creates a larger number of Mythic guilds for not enough Mythic raiders to give them decent-sized rosters. So that's what I think anyway. That's what I think there. But in terms of, if you just look at just raw numbers, we can't say that guild raiding is dying. So it would be ridiculous to suggest it would be on purpose as well, because raiding is the premier content in this game. And I think Blizzard know as well that it is one of the aspects of this game that they do better than other MMOs. You know, so I really don't think. And in fact, if you look at these new data mined achievements for like top 100 Alliance and Horde, sort of suggests, if anything, they want to encourage the raiding. So yeah, I mean, that's what I think on that one. I just think it's too difficult to recruit, not because the supply is less of raiders. It's more. It's because the demand has outstripped the supply. Next one. Let's have a look. Wow, progress. So, okay, talking about those achievements, top 100 Alliance and top 100 Horde for raid achievements, which I'm hoping they will expand. I've talked about that in a video. I'm hoping they will expand that. So talking about WoW progress. Of course, WoW progress exists for a few things, one of which is to give people their world rank so people know where they are in terms of the world ranking on raid bosses. I mean, a couple of things about that. First of all, it won't, because, of course, what WoW progress is really great for is searching up other players. You know, we can, particularly for recruitment and things like that, unless Blizzard are planning on doing something like that themselves. But the second thing is, actually, you know, I never actually understand why it is. When a feature, like a community-created feature, becomes really popular, I never understand why Blizzard don't go, oh, actually, that thing's really popular. People want that. Maybe we should make an official version of it. So why, for example, on the Blizzard, you know, you could have an in-game thing where in-game you select various options for your availability if you're looking for a guild, and then that can show up on official websites like that you're looking for a guild with all the best of it. Why don't they do something like that? You know, but in terms of world ranks, yes, it looks like Blizzard might be doing something like that. It looks like it's going to be divided into faction. So you'd still have WoW progress if you wanted to know where you were actually properly in the world. Because for recruitment, there's different reasons for wanting to know your world rank. One of them is because it's an aim. If you're a progress-minded guild, then actually the world rank you finish on is important to you. But there is another more practical reason as well, and that's for recruitment. So for recruitment, you don't want it to be faction-based because some players will happily change faction. So being able to say your World 100 is a lot better than World 150, for example, and it helps you to distinguish there. Whereas it looks like on the official forums, if they're just going to do it by faction, you looking at two guilds, one of them is like World 70 Alliance, one of them's like World 140 Horde. They might be both equivalent. But you're looking at it and thinking, well, the Alliance one looks like it's higher, I'll join the Alliance one. Of course, you're going to get an achievement that you wouldn't in the Horde one, and maybe that's important. Whereas on WoW Progress, it'll just let you know, actually, do you know what, they're both the same ranking. So I think WoW Progress will still, even for the world ranks, be a place to go for a lot of people. Next one, so on to some gnome shenanigans. So I was suggesting here that, you know, if Blizzard expanded this achievement thing properly, and what I said very, very briefly, is instead of just top 100, you did it for other positions as well, it might encourage more guilds to be Alliance because of the achievement. And it might. I'm not saying it definitely would, but yeah, I think it might. And I'm not saying overnight it would redress the balance, no. But over the course of the expansion, it would help. I think it would certainly slow down the decline. And I do think it could redress the balance. And someone said, but more Alliance players means more gnomes. To which a follow-up question was asked of me. So what's my retort to this? Well, it's quite simple, really. It doesn't mean more gnomes. See, the way I look at it is, there's only, and I said this as well, there's only a finite number of players that are silly enough to play gnomes. Okay, so if anything, massively increasing the pool of Alliance players, particularly at the end of it, you know, raiding end of it, where players tend to be a little bit more sensible. If anything, you'll be diluting the already small gnome population to be even more insignificant. So actually, more Alliance players can potentially mean fewer gnomes, or at least proportionally fewer gnomes. So, you know, that's easily dealt with. Next one. So, okay, yes, this. So I did a video for April Fools, which I scheduled to come out at midnight on April the 1st. And then I got a lot of comments like this. So I don't know if the comments were... There's one of 4 possibilities for them. One, that the comments themselves are viewers' attempts at April Fools, which is possible. Don't believe anything you see on the internet on this day. Second, that people don't think I can tell time. It's rather insulting. Third, that people are unaware that the Earth rotates as it orbits the Sun. I know we've been discussing flat Earthers a little bit on the channel recently, but, you know, maybe there was a little nod towards that. Or fourth, it's just the gnome mafia causing trouble. Whenever I do a video about gnomes, the gnome mafia all come crawling out of their rocks. And they're not going to be happy with one I'm going to be doing next week as well. There is another gnome-related video that may be out tomorrow, but it's when I haven't done it yet. So... and then, oh yeah, back to the Holy Light one. How many pages does this book have? So, I will show you this. Basically, it's got 2 pages. So, if I play it. The reason I've shown the Blood Elf one is because there's a bit of a weird bug you can see there, where it's sort of parallel with their body instead of perpendicular. But you can sort of see there's actually just 2 pages. They're just replicated all the way through. It's the same pages, which is rather disappointing, but I suppose not unexpected. So, yeah, to answer that question, there are 2 pages. And that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share for further content. If you want to get involved in sort of more direct discussions, don't forget to check out my streaming schedule. In particular, Tuesdays, of course, the Azeroth Review, where we just talk about World of Warcraft for a couple of hours. But thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.